Hello and welcome back. I'm going to go into the third segment of this series now, and I'm going to talk about things like void of course moon. I'm going to make a few corrections to the video that I made previously, and I'm going to talk about the chart on the actual date that the launch occurred. And so again, thanks for coming back, and on to the video. Hello and welcome back. So what I want to do is I want to make a quick correction to something I said in the previous video. I said that we had a stellium in Capricorn. That's not true. This is the symbol for Capricorn, right? A stellium is a traffic jam in the sky where 3 or more planets are gathered in the same sign or house. In this situation, we have a 9th house stellium, not a Capricorn stellium, because all of these 3 planets right here are in the 9th house. Okay, we have Mercury in the 9th, we have the Sun in the 9th, and we have Venus in the 9th. Mercury and the Sun are in Capricorn, but as you can see, this dividing line right here divides Capricorn from Aquarius. Venus is over here in Aquarius, okay? So we have a 9th house stellium, not a Capricorn stellium, okay? Now, Capricorn is positioned in the 9th house because of the time of the event, but the natural underlying 9th is Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter. Okay, so Sagittarius rules flight. Okay, Mercury in Capricorn right here, for me, indicates embarrassment. Okay, and there were a lot of embarrassing schedule changes to this launch. There were, of course, it ultimately ended in an embarrassing situation for a lot of people who were on the inside of this thing. Because, of course, the launch was a huge failure and people unfortunately died. And then we have the Sun here, which rules, authorities, I got blurry. And so we have the Sun and Mercury close together here, like I said, in Capricorn. The 9th house rules flight. So here we have, when I saw this, I was like, there's going to be an embarrassing situation here. It's not going to be good. And so then over here in Aquarius, okay, which is ruled by Uranus, which is about unpredictability and instability and explosions and whatnot. And we have Jupiter here, which rules flight, which also rules Sagittarius. And so, and we have that in the 10th house, and the 10th house has to do with fame also, F-A-M-E, fame, like being famous. And of course, this is a very famous accident with regards to aircraft flight. As I said before, this chart is still based on the January 22nd launch date, which is the first launch date that I heard of, and that's why I cast the chart based on that date. Okay, we have the moon in Gemini. Now, Gemini is ruled by Mercury. Mercury rules things like temperature, okay? And as I said before, temperature was a huge problem that day. The moon can represent instability. So we have instability with regards to temperature here, okay? So I also saw that pretty quickly as being a problem. So the moon is debilitated in the sign of Gemini, okay? Each planet, or the sun, the moon, and all that, they have signs that they are stronger in and signs that they are weaker in. Okay, let's take, for instance, the sign of Aries, okay? Saturn is not exalted in Aries. It's actually debilitated, okay? So it's not the best place for Saturn to be. It's not in Aries right now. I'm just giving you an example. Same thing with the moon. The moon is not in its best position. in the sign of Gemini. The moon is actually exalted or in its best position in Taurus. And so, of course, we have the moon in a debilitated sign, okay? And also Gemini is duality and instability, temperature, and all of that. And so we have a planet there that is not in a good sign. And so that's another thing that I saw right off. So now I'm going to go on to the actual date of the event. It was rescheduled several times, but I remember the school, I was in school at the time, high school. They had televisions set up and everything, waiting for the launch. And I think the original time was 9:38, and then it actually didn't launch until 11:30ish, I think. But because I didn't know what the launch time was going to be, because I thought that sort of thing is unpredictable, I just went ahead and used the 12 p.m. time. The explosion occurred, though, earlier at around 11:40 a.m. And so I set this chart up on equal houses, okay, and this is a lot nicer. The one that I did was hand-drawn, and so it was kind of harder to read. So I wish I could find it. That would be really neat to have to look back on, but I just can't find it. I had all kinds of notes written out, all kinds of explanations, drawings of the charts and everything. It was, yeah, but I've lost all that stuff. But okay, here we have in this chart, it's a lot like the other chart. The descendant is in Scorpio, which puts the 8th house cusp in Sagittarius, which rules flight. We still have Uranus in Sagittarius. We have Neptune in Neptune in Capricorn, but we have them both in the 8th house, and the 8th house again rules death. Okay, so we have flight, we have unpredictability, instability, explosions, that sort of thing right here with Uranus. We have Neptune in the 8th house, which deals with bodies of water like the ocean and so on. And so I only really had to look at this and go, you know, that this is a deadly flight. Flight, 8th house of death, Uranus there. And so just using the 12 o'clock time. Now, if they had launched at 9:30ish, the chart would look different, and I'll explore that also. So we have the moon has moved from Gemini. It was over here in Gemini just a few days earlier. The moon moves very quickly. It's already in Virgo at 11 degrees. Okay, and I'll get into that in just a moment. And let's see. We still have Jupiter in Aquarius in the 10th. So we have Jupiter ruling Sagittarius and flight in Aquarius, which is ruled by Uranus, which is instability, explosions, 911, emergency, in the 10th house of fame. Okay? And it was, like I said, a very famous explosion. But now I'm going to get more into, also going to look at the 12th house again. Again, the 12th house cusp starts in Aries, just like in previous charts that I've shown you. Okay, and then we have the North Node in Taurus, and of course Taurus is an earth sign. You think of the ground, okay? And then the North Node, you think of, the North Node is associated with fate and destiny. So it was, I guess, destined to hit the ground. It's in the house of sorrows, troubles, and secrets, which is the 12th house. The underlying sign of the 12th house is Pisces, which rules the ocean, etc. So it was like, you've heard the expression, no matter how you chop it, it comes up peanuts. Well, it just kept doing that every chart that I would cast. But I want to go into something else right now. I want to show you. So one thing about the moon is whenever you embark upon something, certain types of things, you want to make sure the moon is not void of course. In this particular incident, on this particular day, the moon being void of course was not an issue, because as you can see, on January 27th, it went void of course, and then by the end of the 27th, the void of course period ended. Now it didn't launch until the 28th. So void of course is over all the way until the 29th at around 5:42 p.m. It began again. So moon void of course was not a factor on that particular day at that particular time. So knowing when the moon is void of course and knowing what activities to pursue during void of course moon and which activities to avoid is helpful. For instance, void of course moon time periods are good for planning, cleaning and organizing, that sort of thing, but it's a bad time to maybe sign a contract, buy things. Let's say the moon is void of course and you don't know it, of course, because you don't know anything about this. You get on Amazon and you buy a bunch of stuff and it just sits in a box, and you might end up just selling it, or it wasn't usable, something, and it was broken or whatever. You might even end up returning it. That sort of thing happens when you buy during a void of course moon, and so that's to be expected. But in this particular day, on this particular time, it was not void of course. But now I want to look at the 22nd, when the first announcement that I heard was made for the launch date was supposed to be the 22nd. That was the original plan, according to an interview that Kirsty Macintosh was doing. I can't remember the interviewer, but I remember her saying the 22nd, and that's what I based my first chart on. Okay, at 9:36 in the morning, the moon went void of course. I'm not sure what time the launch was supposed to be. Okay, and then it ended later on the 22nd, a few hours later, well, later that night, around 11:16 p.m. And so, even though that's not when it ended up launching, that was like I said, the birth of the idea, the beginning of the concept, and that's why I initially used that date. And it was void of course during that time, which means it didn't end up happening during that time. And sort of the general feeling of void of course moon is nothing will come of this. Okay, that's kind of the phrase that kind of sticks out in my mind. Also, there's another expression used to talk about void of course moons, and it's called running in the emptiness. The moon is running in the emptiness. Okay, and so yeah, it helps to know about void of course moon. I think it was helpful in this case because when I looked it up to see if the moon was going to be void of course on the 22nd, sure enough it was, and it did not launch at that date and time. So I hope that helps explain my thought process on why I believed it was doomed from the start, no matter when it launched. But, well, there were actually time periods that were a little more beneficial, okay? But I knew that the 22nd probably wouldn't be it because of that void of course moon. So there are aspects in astrology. You have squares, oppositions, semi-squares, trines, sextiles, quincunxes, that sort of thing. And something else that stood out to me immediately was we have Mars in Scorpio. Scorpio is associated with death. We have Mars, which is associated with things like firearms, military bases, violence, injuries, that sort of thing. And we have it forming a square to Jupiter, which rules flight, the sign of Sagittarius. Okay, and so a square is known as a harsh aspect. And here this red line shows it, the square between Mars and Jupiter. And so that's something else that stood out to me very quickly, is that square or challenging aspect between Mars and Jupiter. One of the most profound squares that I found is we have Mercury, okay, and it's in Aquarius in this chart. All right, Mercury deals with temperature. Aquarius is ruled by Uranus. It deals with things like explosions, unpredictability, 911, ambulances, that sort of thing. And it's forming a square to Pluto, which is the co-ruler of Scorpio. Some astrologers don't believe that, but I'm an astrologer that believes Pluto. I don't care if it's a moon or a planet. I couldn't care less. I'm saying it's significant, okay? And I use it as a co-ruler of Scorpio. Now, Pluto rules the underworld, death, everything dark and horrible, basically. Okay, so we have Pluto, which is a planet associated with death, forming a square or a challenging aspect to Mercury, which is a planet of, like I said, temperature, the actual element of Mercury, which goes into thermometers, that sort of thing. So temperature problems is what caused the death of all these people. It's at 7 degrees also, which stood out to me, and 7 people died in this. So that's sort of what I saw, in a matter of a few minutes. Like I said, the very first thing that stood out to me was the 8th house. Sagittarius rules flight. Uranus there, Neptune there. That sewed it up for me, but I just kept looking at other areas of the chart for confirmation of what I was thinking at the time. And I hate that I was right. I wanted to be wrong. I really did. Let's look at the actual time of the explosion. It was January 28th, 1986, around 11:38 a.m., which is about 20 minutes earlier than the chart I just showed you. It doesn't look very much different. The ascendant is still in Taurus. The descendant is still in Scorpio, okay? But Pluto has moved into the 7th house. We're into the equal house system again. So we still have Pluto and Mars there. Okay. We still have, waiting for this blur to stop. Okay, we still have Sagittarius ruling the 8th house. Sagittarius rules flight, as I said before. We have Saturn here. We have Uranus here and Neptune here under the equal house system. Okay, so that looks pretty much the same 20 minutes later. This changed a little bit, but we have Mercury in the 9th house. It's in Aquarius, like I said, ruled by Uranus, which rules unexpected events, 911, emergency, things just falling apart. So we have Mercury there in the 9th house. The 9th house is ruled by Jupiter in Sagittarius, which rules flight. Again, more redundant. It's like the Department of Repetitive Redundancy here, but, I'm just discussing what I saw. Okay, but this was after the fact, because I didn't know it was going to launch at 11:38. I think everybody kind of thought it was going to launch earlier that morning, and it kept getting put off for this reason and that reason or whatever. Okay, and of course we still have the moon in Virgo in the same position. So everything stayed pretty much the same during a 20-minute time period, just a few slight differences. The thing I saw is here we have the North Node in Taurus. Okay, Across from the north node is always going to be the south node. But the south node a lot of times is invisible. It's not notated because they assume that the astrologer knows that the south node is always going to be across from the north node. Now the north node looks like a horseshoe, okay, turned with the feet down. The south node would be upside down, turned with the feet up. And Pluto, the planet of death, is conjunct the south node, and the south node is more negative in regards to fate. Okay, like a lot of people call the north node, they call it the angel on your shoulder, and they call the south node the devil on your shoulder. Some people look at it that way. And so there is Pluto, the planet of death, conjunct the devil on your shoulder, the south node. And so that's another thing that I saw. Now I'm going to look at what it would have looked like had the launch gone on around 9:30, which was, I think, the original time it was supposed to launch that day. So astrological conditions are not much better. We have the 8th house being ruled by Scorpio, associated with death. Pluto and Mars there. Violence, military bases, blah, blah, blah. Pluto, like I said, the planet of death. Then in the 9th house, we have the natural ruler, Sagittarius. Okay, Saturn and Uranus are there. And so that's still a problem. In the 11th house, we have a stellium. We have Mercury, the Sun, and Venus all in the 11th house. And the 11th house deals with things like greater society, that sort of thing. In the 10th house, we still have it's being ruled by Sagittarius, which is flight. But Neptune is in Capricorn here. And so, of course, this is a famous base near water. Okay. But here we have again in the 12th house of sorrows, troubles, and secrets. Jupiter is still in Aquarius. Okay. Jupiter rules flight. It's the it's the ruler of Sagittarius. And it's in a bad house. The natural underlying house here again, the natural underlying sign is Pisces, which rules the ocean, and so on. And so that 9:30-ish time probably wasn't much better. I think because of temperature, which remained around the top of the chart during all the other charts that I did, anything at the top of the chart is kind of like cause for alarm. Here we have Uranus at the top of the chart, which is bombs, explosions, etc. Okay? And so, because of temperature, because of the time of year they wanted to do this, it was doomed from the start. Also, that spacecraft had been used several times previously. And what they've learned from that is that's kind of a bad idea to keep. Pluto also deals with recycling, by the way, using the same thing over and over. And I think this indicates that this particular recycling journey was going to be deadly. Because after so many times in space, a spacecraft, gets a lot of wear and tear. And that contributed also, according to reports that I've heard. But again, the main problem, the main cause of the explosion was had to do with, and I said in my notes, I remember saying something like, there's something about rings. There's something about rings, but I didn't know about the O-rings yet. But there was a problem with crystallization or freezing of the O-rings or something, which contributed greatly to the accident. And so, and then we have Saturn at the top of the chart, and what stood out to me about that is, Saturn has rings. So there might be something about rings about this. And sure enough, it came out later that it had to do with O-rings. But anyway, doomed from the start. I think mostly due to the wear and tear on the spacecraft, recycling. Pluto deals with recycling as well. and temperature, like I said before. But anyway, thank you for watching this video, and thank you for completing the series. If you have any questions, let me know. And I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great day. Bye-bye.